Welcome to the Private Practice Pro podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping therapists cultivate success. Here's your host, Kelley Stevens.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Private Practice Pro podcast. I have my friend Mary Beth Somich here. And Mary Beth, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us, first of all, where you are in the world, and tell us about your private practice. And then you also have some resources for therapists. So give us your whole spiel.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I'm Mary Beth Somich. I'm a licensed therapist in private practice. I'm also the owner of a group practice called Your Journey Through. And we have 2 locations in North Carolina, in Raleigh and Wake Forest. And then I also do some business coaching work with therapists. I have a course called Insta Growth for Therapists to help therapists kind of expand their reach and their presence on social media. And then I also have a course called the Connected Collab, where those therapists who have grown their social media presence can then start partnering with different brands or companies in ethical ways that align with being a licensed professional. So that's me.
Who do you tend to see in private practice?
I love family dynamic work, but sometimes that happens with individuals, like in an individual capacity. So most of my clients are now college age or like young adults, like in their 20s and 30s. But I do also love working with teens. I know you work with teens, and it's such like a niche thing. So many people are like intimidated to work with teens, but I know we both love it.
I literally love it. Right after we record today, I have a session with a client who I've seen since they were a teenager and now they're in college. And that transition is just such a fun time. Maybe because I loved it. You know, it's a hard time and you're figuring yourself out, but it's also such a good time, I feel like, for people to go to therapy, you know? So I like working with that.
That's how I describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, there's so many huge identity shifts and transformations and learning experiences in that time that it's just really cool to be able to guide.
Oh, totally. And like, I always feel like selfishly as a therapist, you know, like working with young adults, like I think they're at this magic time in their life where oftentimes they have some family support, you know, like they have a parent who's rooting for them or coaches or someone who's in their life. But they also have enough independence that they can try to make some change on their own. And I think it's nice to be a therapist because, at least I see like clients make some good progress, you know? And so you feel really hopeful and you're helping them move through this phase of life, which I always think is a nice thing for sure.
I'm glad you brought that up because one of my niche areas that's developed over the years is an enmeshment. And a lot of people don't know that term.
Yeah.
And it's essentially when a family unit is so close that it lacks boundaries, it can get really unhealthy and create other issues. And the way to avoid enmeshment is to have this process of healthy differentiation when you're a teenager, ideally. And when that doesn't happen, then it creates the risk of enmeshment and a whole slew of other issues. So I love also working with teens and college age kids because I can kind of help them eventually avoid that process too, and healthily differentiate in ways that, you know, feel good for both the child and the parents.
Oh my gosh, yes. And like I can remember sitting in a session a few years ago with a high school senior and talking to his parents about like, it's really his job right now in his life to become independent from you. And that's normal. And I remember all 3 of them, the parents and the teen, looking at me like, I mean, just terrified, you know, like, this is not what we want, you know? And I'm like, well, you're a senior, like you're going to college next year, you know? But it can be such a hard transition for families, you know? And
yeah, it can, especially if there's that intergenerational enmeshment, because it's also largely cultural sometimes too. So yeah, there's a lot of that work.
It's funny. I feel like since becoming a mom, and we have kids close in it. How old is your daughter again?
She turned 2 a month ago.
Yeah. So ours are 1 year apart. Mine's turning 3 this month. And now having kids versus when I first started seeing families, I feel like I have so much more empathy for parents who have to let go because I am already, I'm going to have to go to so much therapy, but like, I feel like I'm already afraid. I'm like, I'm not ready, you know? I mean, he's only 3, so I still like help him
Yeah.
go to the bathroom.
I was just talking to a friend about that because like levels of attachment.
Yeah.
And I was trying to frame it like, okay, when she was a baby infant, I was so attached. And now she's 2 and it's like loosening the grip. And I think by the time she's like 16, 18, I will just continue loosening the grip healthily, hopefully, if it continues on this trajectory. But who knows?
Yeah,
We'll
I guess it's like a slow like I agree with that. Like when my son turned 1, I felt like, God, it was hard. I was like, he's not a baby. He doesn't need me in the same way. And now when I think back on that 2 years ago, I'm like, oh yeah, thank God he's not a baby anymore, But at the time, I felt like devastated. I mean, like I said, I probably need to do my own work on this side of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think in every life stage, you have to do your own work, right? You like process things differently.
Oh my gosh, totally. So, okay, we have so many things I want to get into today. And I want to talk a little bit about the Connected Collab, because this is something I feel like we get a lot of questions on, and something we really haven't talked about on the podcast at all. So maybe can you talk to us a little bit about like your experience? So you had your group practice, you had built a following on Instagram. Instagram is your main platform, right? And then, so how did you kind of start to have the idea of like, okay, I might want to work with brands? Like what were the first kind of steps that you took?
Well, I don't know if I really took any in the beginning. I think brands started approaching me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what do I do with this? How do I do it ethically? I have a big learning curve. And there was nothing out there for therapists.
Yeah.
And when there's nothing out there for therapists, I try to create it, because I'm like, I'm not the only one who needs it.
Totally.
And I'm sure you have the same mentality with like your business.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'll kind of give you the trajectory, because it is a very kind of like step-by-step thing. So during the pandemic is when I was doing a lot of one-on-one business coaching with therapists around how to grow on Instagram.
Right.
And then when the pandemic hit and there was just like this massive boom of the mental health need, I was like, okay, how can I scale this? Because I want to help these clients in need find these therapists, and these therapists need to be visible in order to be found. Right. So, finding a way to kind of support therapists in building their social media presence. And so I created Instagrowth for Therapists, launched it in early 2021, like January. Right. And since like, I think there's 250 therapists in it now, and many of them have grown to the point where they were also being approached by these brands. Yeah. And then coming to me as like the next step and saying, how do I navigate this? I didn't learn this in graduate school. Help me. I want to do this. This is a great opportunity to like spread mental health awareness, but I need to learn more. So that's why I created the Connected Collab, which covers pretty much everything. It's like, it has scripts for what to say when a brand reaches out to you, really specific questions to ask, really specific language to identify in contracts, how to set your rates, all the things pretty much. It has like a brand collab tracker so you can stay on top of all of your brand deals.
Wait, I need that.
Yeah. Yes. Right. I know. It's such an awesome resource. Well, I was doing my taxes this year and I'm like, how much have I made off brand collabs? And I can just pull up this tracker and it's all in Excel. And I'm like, well, this is the best thing ever. So, and then also just to kind of follow up with those contacts for continued collaboration. Right. But there's also a ton in there on ethics. Like there are people I will not collaborate with for many reasons. Either they don't respect and pay therapists ethically, or this is more of a personal decision, but I really think it does align with our licensing boards, is I don't collab with like any unregulated substances. So like I will get pitches for supplements all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just like, no, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Or like CBD oil, like these kind of substances that even if I would like recommend them to someone, or, I take a couple supplements health-wise myself, I'm like, I'm just not going to recommend them as a licensed professional because it creates liability. So knowing those 100%. Things, and so that you can be, so you can be selective in who you're working with.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. When you think about this, like supplement companies, I feel like for whatever reason are really into affiliate marketing. And I get those emails too. And my husband is a physician. So he's like, absolutely not. Like, you are not a medical professional. You are not like, no, do not walk into this can of worms. But in terms of like therapeutic products, like there's, amazing journal companies out there that offer different really cool planners or just mindfulness apps or, things that we recommend to our clients, I feel like are so great. And like, I get this question all the time on Instagram of like, how do you do this ethically? I think like there's kind of a stigma in a way. I don't know. Have you found this like where people are like, therapists shouldn't represent any products, or like sometimes I get those messages and it's like, but we tell our clients about products in session, like we give them things, suggest things like workbooks and all sorts of stuff. So do you ever get any of that pushback from people?
Rarely, I think. And I kind of get that, but at the same time, like you said, we promote certain things in session and they're really helpful resources. So why am I going to keep a helpful resource from someone who could truly benefit from it? And I'm not going to promote anything I don't believe in, anything that isn't ethically aligned. So yeah, I feel like, and I also in the course have a lot of language and like disclaimers. Like for instance, even in my informed consent with my clients, there's specific language around like you are not influenced to purchase anything that I talk about, anything I promote, like just really tightening those disclaimers up too to protect yourself.
I think that's a great idea. Like I feel like my hairdresser needs that. Whenever I go to the salon, I end up with like $200 worth of product. And I'm like, I don't know that I needed this. Like wish someone had told me I didn't need this. But I think that's important and I think it's good, and I always find too with mental health, whether it's like being an influencer in the mental health space or, having collaborations or affiliates, it's like I find that, how am I trying to say what I'm trying to say? Like other people are doing it anyway. Non-therapists, whether it's coaches or wellness people are talking about things. So I always think like, as therapists, I feel like we kind of have an obligation to be a part of the conversation as licensed professionals of saying, no, these are the things that are evidence-based, or these are the things that work, or these are the things that I use with my clients. And if you're not a part of the conversation, coaches and other people will be anyway,
Yep. Absolutely. I'm so glad you made that point. There was some statistic that came out that I think it was like 57%, or don't quote me on that, but I think it was 57% of psychoeducation on TikTok is inaccurate.
Yeah.
And like 70% of it was from personal experience and not by a licensed professional in terms of the psychoeducation out there. And I will tell you, I have so many clients that come in and they're like, so I think I have this diagnosis. And I'm like, from TikTok? And they're like, yeah, this TikTok video. I'm like, let's talk about that because I'm sitting in front of you as a licensed professional and I respect your curiosity and I want to encourage your curiosity. And like, let's talk about this together because I think there is an obligation as a licensed professional who has gone to school for a number of years that can give more objective, even like diagnostic criteria to something rather than a subjective experience.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if I had $1 for the number of times my young adult clients came in and told me that they think they have ADHD because someone on TikTok told them they have ADHD, I'd be rich. I mean,
exactly.
And I find that like, especially with TikTok and because of the way these algorithms work, usually like that there's like a popular diagnosis for a while, like all over TikTok. Like right now, I feel like, or at least on my feed, all over TikTok is ADHD, which people have ADHD, obviously. And it's important if you have it to know the criteria. But only going to TikTok for that advice and not talking to somebody who's licensed or at least following licensed therapists can be a bad idea, because we can miss them.
And I'm just thinking like, let's talk about what TikTok is. It's an app where there's a continuous stream of like 5 to 20 second videos of like, flash bulbs of attention seeking. So, I mean, there's already some like bias there towards that particular diagnosis. So it's just
100%. 100. There's probably a reason I like TikTok. I know.
You're like, and I'm self-diagnosing.
And I have ADHD. Yeah. Well, and I actually do. So, okay. Tell me, in terms of how you balance your private practice schedule now between creating, because you create content for Instagram and you have these courses and you're a mom and you have your private practice. What does your like day-to-day life look like? How does that work?
Yeah, gosh. And I have a podcast.
Oh, yes.
I forgot about that one.
Am I missing anything?
Yes.
No,
I think that's about it. I mean, I sat down with my husband. We went on a trip to Europe in August, and we sat down and we were talking about like our intentions for the next year. And I was like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And there was like 5 things that were full-time jobs for people.
Yeah.
And I was like trying to do them all. And I was like, what am I offloading? So I got off a board that I was on, a nonprofit board that was taking up a lot of my time. I said, I'm not going to live launch my courses anymore because I live launched. Yes. Right. It's a lot. It's a huge commitment.
Live launch. Never again.
Yeah. This is my new thing this year. Because the launch process is like 3 months long.
Yeah.
And I did it 3 times last year. That's 9 months of 12 that I was in live launch mode.
Yeah.
And I looked at my husband, I was like, this is going to be potentially a big hit to our income. He was like, do it.
Yeah.
Like I see the effort that it requires and just don't do it. You know? So, I mean, they're still for sale, but they're open. So they're actually more accessible to people, which is one of my values is accessibility. Yeah. So, that just kind of does its own thing now. And then, so I guess my day-to-day Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are my client days. Okay. And I try not to see more than 5 people a day on those days. That. Yeah. I feel like my sweet spot is 4, but like inevitably I leave 1 more hour in those days for people because emergencies can happen, last minute requests. So that's been really nice to kind of commit to 4, but then leave a 5th hour open.
Yeah, that is nice.
Just in case. But in the mornings, I mean, I see clients from like 1 to 6. So I have the entire morning with my 2-year-old and it's like a slower morning. We spend a lot of time outside. I have my coffee, make her breakfast. I might answer a couple emails here or there. She's like playing independently, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. It's like the best when they start doing
scarce that is.
Whoa.
Yes. I know. Or like check my DMs or something. And then I get home in time to put her to bed, which is important to me. So, and then Mondays and Fridays I leave for the other stuff. So I might have networking meetings, admin work, content creation, a partnership or collab. And then just the little things about being a group practice owner. So like the admin stuff to catch up on. Yeah. So I usually carve out about 5 hours a day from like 12 to 5 on like the same schedule I'm on the rest of the week to do that.
5 hours a week or 5 hours? You said 5 hours a day.
5 hours a day on Mondays. And then occasionally on Fridays, I'll take a lot of Fridays off, honestly. I'll just work a couple hours. Those are kind of like my flex maybe days. But it's been interesting to how my schedule has changed over the years. I remember being a brand new therapist and being like, asking my clients their availability, right? I'm like, never again. No way. So yeah, now I have like 12 to 15, like really 12 slots available for therapy clients to book online with me. And they're like very specific hours.
I do find it's so funny. Like once you start realizing like you have to book during certain times, clients just magically find a way to make it work, you know?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm curious. I'm going to like flip it around for a second and ask you a question because my daughter's going to preschool just 2 mornings a week, like 9 to 1,
Isn't it the best?
Starting in September.
Oh my God,
well, I'm not there yet. Yeah, starting in September. So, I mean, I'm excited for that. But I think I'm going to shift my hours earlier so that I can like pick her up and be with her later in the day. And still in the back of my head, there's this part of me that's nervous to switch my hours to that early. Because I'm not a morning person. And I've always been this kind of like noon to 6.
Right.
1 to 6, like those hours. So to switch to like a 9 to 1 schedule is going to be wild for me. But you feel like it went really well.
Yeah. Okay. So my son, first of all, preschool is the best thing that ever happened.
Aw,
I love it.
That's great.
And it's like there's a transition there. But so my son goes to school. He's 3. So now it's officially preschool. He goes to preschool from 9 to 1 each day. And every day, Monday through Friday. And we started him out on like 2 days a week, and then 3 and then 4. And then we found that like for him, the consistency of going every morning and like he has this little routine and his friends and their snack and their everything worked really well. So I only really work those hours. But at that same age, you know, they start to nap, that long nap in the afternoon. So I would go pick him up and then he naps for 2 or 3 hours. So so really it's kind of like having a full day because but I can't book clients during the nap because, you know, if he wakes up, but there's a million other, you know, with running content and everything, there's a million other things you could do. So and you know, even before he went to preschool, I had a babysitter who came in the morning. So I've always, and even though, so like my clients have gotten older. So like I do historically have seen teens, but as the last few years have gone, I haven't taken very many new clients and my clients have aged. So, you know, the majority of them are like college freshmen, sophomores and juniors. And now they like have stuff in the, you know, they don't have to come after school. So that has kind of worked out. And then, I've just found that like every once in a while, I'll do a 7 o'clock appointment after my son goes to sleep. I really don't like to. It's hard to go back after I'm home and, you know, so I sometimes do it, but very rarely. And it's usually for clients who I've seen for like, I know that there's no other way they can do it. But I've kind of found that like with my clients, they do find a way. And it's not always the most convenient, you know, and they're definitely, I have stopped taking new clients. Like for all of 2023, I'm definitely not going to take anyone new. So I don't have to fit in new people anymore. And I think that that's where it's harder, you know?
So we're in like the exact same boat where I've had my teen clients for like 5 years. So they're in college now.
They're no longer
they're
teenagers.
They're like graduating college at this point. Like it's really cool to have had clients for that long. And I rarely take new clients. Because I have associates who are taking new clients. So that's nice. But I think we'll be on like basically the same exact schedule by September. So
I love it. And I think like with having young kids, like I want to be home after school. Like that's just one of my values. You know, I want to be the one to pick them up. Although my parents live locally, so my dad does pick up twice a week and like does the nap like seemingly never happens on the days grandpa picks up. But
funny.
My parents were home after school and I know it's a huge luxury, but I think it's like one of the things as a therapist I'm able to do because I'm able to move my schedule around. So I knew that at some point, like I've always worked until the evening. Like I used to see, I don't even want to tell you how many clients in a day.
Oh goodness.
But like, so I used to always work until like 8 or 9 at night. Because I would see teens, you know, so I'd start at 1 or 2 in the afternoon and then I would go until 8 or 9 at night. But it's so nice to be home when my son's home, you know, and to like do the snack and make dinner. And, you know, I don't think I've ever cooked this much in my entire life, you know, like I like love that joke of like, oh my God, I realized I'm going to have to make dinner every night for like the rest of my life.
Right. Yes.
What is that about?
I know. And I love that like both of us are in the space of helping other therapists or parents that really value that too, create that for themselves through, you know, launching private practices, through passive income streams, whether it's social media, collabs, partnerships, whatever it is. Like not only are we now living that, but now we are helping other people live that too.
100%. I mean,
cool.
I think that that's like, it's so cool. I mean, I think it's like, when I think about your programs with Connected Collab and Insta Growth for Therapists, I think that that's the underlying perk is like therapists having a chance to live whatever their values are. So it's like, if you want your morning because you're an ultra marathoner and you need 3 hours every morning to go run, then you can do that as a therapist and you can work until late in the evening. And if you're a mom or a dad or a parent and you want to be home for after school, you can do that. There's ways to make it happen. And I think we have that flexibility, which is, I mean, it's not lost on me that that's a huge privilege, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're told in our graduate programs that it's probably not going to be that way, which I think is such a huge disservice. Like expect to work long hours for little money. And we're not even given these options to make it scalable through course creation, through collaboration. Like I knew nothing. I didn't even know that was a possibility
Me
when I
either.
graduated grad school. So I mean, I had no idea that social media was going to be part of my job as a therapist.
I had,
And here we are.
I
So,
know, right? It's weird. Sometimes I feel
yeah.
like sometimes I look at my life like creating Instagram content. I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what would my graduate professors say? Am I doing something
Some
wrong?
of
But no,
mine
you're doing a
follow
lot
me.
right.
Some of mine have been on the show,
Oh my
and some of them
gosh.
follow me. It's pretty fun, and some of them create their own content. But
That's
I
awesome.
grew up. I went to school in LA, which I feel like is a little bit more
Okay.
media. Like I had professors and people in school who are like the media therapist. Like who were on Real Housewives
cool.
and that kind of thing. So like I feel like it's a
Oh
little
my
bit more
gosh.
less, what do you call it? Less stigmatized out here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went to school in New York City. I went
Oh,
to
so
Columbia,
same,
but I
yeah.
still don't feel like that like wasn't totally the vibe yet
Yeah.
though. But now since being on Instagram, and I mean, I graduated like almost 10 years
Yeah.
ago, basically. I've found some people that I went to graduate school with who have larger followings. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you were in my class.
Yes. Well, and even like I was talking to I had a professor that I used to have on the podcast now, and he was like, I find actually with our current graduate students that there's this pressure because there are so many therapists on social media now that there's a pressure that like you become a therapist and you have to have a follow, which is so funny because for me it was the opposite. It was like, don't go on social media, like only like whatever people do that, But now he was saying like a lot of his students have the opposite problem where they feel like, they have to like do it or something.
Yeah. Maybe I should start trying to go speak at grad programs. Like, here's Instagram for therapists.
100% you should. I'll tell you, out of my course sales, when I look at my course sales, half of people who buy my course are in graduate school. And it's not applicable.
I believe it.
Like, I mean, it is applicable, but it's not that phase. Like it's geared toward early licensure. You're starting your private practice. But I have so many grad students who say, I just want to be prepared, and they take it and they get lifetime access so they can keep coming back to it anyway. But I was shocked. I was like, but I guess, you're not teaching it in school. So you should do that. You should go speak at your alma mater and go do it.
That would be a good idea. Okay.
Just add another thing to that plate that you have going.
Yeah, right. Just one more thing.
Hey, therapists. Are you listening to the show and thinking, I really want to launch my own private practice, but I have no idea where to start? Make sure to check out Kelley's Private Practice Roadmap course. In the course, Kelley gives you the exact steps you need to open your own thriving practice. You can find the link below in the show notes.
What about in terms of when you kind of look at the next 10 years of your career? So you have all these different aspects of your business. Where are you hoping to go with all of it?
Oof, that's a great question. I am not someone who can really
do it that way.
I don't know. Yeah, 10 years is so long out for me. I'm like, I have no idea where I'd be. But at the same time, I do kind of have the goal to write a book. At some point.
I like about therapy. About what?
I think so. About therapy, self-development book. I do a lot of family work, a lot of boundaries, a lot of enmeshment, a lot of that. So maybe that arena. But I also have this vision of writing a book when I'm taking a step back a little bit and I have young kids and I can, just have that time. So we'll see. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 years sounds accurate.
Do it. Oh my gosh. I feel like I think we need more boundaries books. What is that boundaries book that came out last year? Of course I'm wrong.
Nidra.
Yes.
It's Nidra.
What is it
Nidra.
called?
I forget. I don't know how to say her last name. Gosh.
I'll put it in the show notes. I know. I know. Yeah. Because I just was reading it. Why can't I remember her last name? But so good. And it was the first book that I read. That was yes. And it was the first one I read that was all about boundaries, where it really broke it down and gave scripts. And oh my gosh, it was so good. But yeah, you should write a book.
Yeah, I know. That's a good one.
I think.
Okay. Well, if any publishing companies are listening, you can reach out in the show notes, my contact information.
And then you'll have to come back
Yeah.
and like give I feel like that's a question I get a lot too of like, how am I going to write a book? What do I do?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not always, I wrote a children's book, but that's a totally different process than,
No way.
yeah, but like
That's so
before
cool.
Private Practice Pro, but that's nothing, it's not the same. The children's publishing is really different. And
Gotcha.
so people always ask like, how do I do this? And I'm like, oh, I only know about kids' books. So totally different.
Yeah, you should totally like have a therapist on who is published and like walk people through that process. That'd be cool.
Yeah. So I feel like there's kind of like two camps. So I've had therapists on who've self-published books. And then, you know, I think there's the other camp of being approached by a publisher and getting a book deal. And I think that can be a challenge. So I should have somebody on. If you know anyone, let me know. I had an author approach me that wasn't a therapist. And I felt like, you know what, I think it's important that it's a licensed therapist, not just somebody with a book deal.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Maybe we'll get Nidra.
Yeah. Nidra, Sit with Wit, has a great book out. So.
We were messaging recently. Okay, that's a good idea. We're going to give her a shout out in this episode and make her come on.
Perfect.
Okay, so in the next 10 years, maybe a book. Do you ever think about another office location, or are you feeling content on where you're at?
Possibly. I don't know if I ever want to get into being like too big as a group practice, because I really love that kind of like boutique, very cultivated like vibe. So I don't know, maybe, I mean, right now there's 4 of us and that's like really fun. And I feel really close to my other therapists who work here. So maybe like a 10 max is kind of what I'm thinking. So maybe like another location, but always kind of keeping it small and intimate and just quality over quantity for sure.
How do you guys do it in terms of like, do you guys meet once a week or once a month, or in terms of like the clinical part of it?
Yeah. So I cannot supervise as their boss. That's like a hard line. So they all have individual supervisors beyond me. But in terms of just like running the practice management side, we meet bi-weekly all together. And then quarterly individually. Right. So I have individuals quarterly with each of them, but we also do a quarterly team dinner. So those are kind of like the 3 ways. And then, I mean, I'm always accessible. Like they'll text me one-offs like every few days, like a question here and there. So
that's so cool. So how does it in terms of, because that's interesting what you said is like, as their boss, you can't be their supervisor. Is that a state rule for your state, or is that
It is.
Wow, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a state rule. And I think it's really great to kind of keep that line of separation. And I always tell them like, as you know, your boss or your peer, like I can tell you what I would do, but you absolutely never have to do that. Like you're under supervision, you know, in terms of like clinical things. But yeah. And then of course I have like my rules for the practice that they kind of do have to do, but that's totally different. It's not like in a clinical capacity.
I mean, so in California, it can be both. It often is. And that presents so many challenges where the supervisor is also the boss. So you know, people end up keeping their clients for too long, or they make decisions that are best for the business and not necessarily best for the client. So that is very cool. I didn't know that that's how it was. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have, so I'm licensed clinical mental health, but I also have a social work therapist or social worker and licensed marriage and family therapist. So we also like span different licensure types within my practice. And so it's really nice for them to have supervisors within their licensure type too. And usually that's required. There's some flexibility, but
that is very cool. Are any of the people in your practice licensed in other states, or are you guys all licensed in one state, or how does it work?
We're all licensed in North Carolina. I have 2 therapists looking at getting licensed in other states just because we get a lot of referrals in from there. And obviously you can't work with those people until you're licensed. One of them's New York because I'm from New York. I have a larger following in New York. So we get a lot of New York referrals and I'm like, sorry, can't offer therapy formally to you. So, I mean, it's always an option. I do see some practices who like encourage their associates to get licensed in like several states just for that flexibility.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I get asked that question a lot on the podcast, and I've been trying to kind of ask my guests of like, how do you feel about dual licensure? And It's a tough one. I don't know that there's a right answer. You know, I know some therapists who do some coaching and other things, but that presents its own host of challenges. So, yeah, that's so tough. And I would imagine with an Instagram following your size, you get a fair number of inquiries from out of state, right?
Yeah, I do. And I do offer mental health coaching for very specific niche clients, like my enmeshment clients from out of state. But that is completely separate from my therapy practice. So there are different consent forms. I am very clear that it's not reimbursable by insurance. It's, you know, no diagnoses will be given, that kind of thing. And I don't take any like high risk coaching clients with like a history, because that's just a lot of liability there for coaching.
I think that could be your next course. I think there are a lot of therapists who want to know how to do that, and you should do that.
Yeah.
Because I get that question all the time of like, how do you transition a coaching arm? Is it a separate business? Is it not? And it's a question that I don't want to answer, so you should answer it.
Okay. Well, and then there's the whole thing of my husband is military.
Right.
And he used to be active and he's reserved now. So we have a little bit more locational stability at this time in our lives. But there was a time period where he was moving every 3 years.
Oh, man.
And as a therapist, you either have to go through the entire licensure process there. There are specific states where you might have to go back to grad school to take certain classes to get licensed there. So that coaching flexibility is like invaluable in 100%. That context, which, you know, military families are a whole culture. And there are a lot of therapists that are either military or have spouses that are military or partners. So,
I mean, I think like that moving piece, I can remember my husband used to live in Philly and moved to California. And I can remember calling my program director. We were friends. And it was the only time like I started crying and I was like, I'm going to have to move. And I'm still an associate. My hours are not going to count. Like it was just like heart wrenching, you know, especially when you're early, you know, when now being a few years licensed, we can ideally get some reciprocity. It's a little bit easier. But when you're in that like pre-licensure phase, the moving can be so heartbreaking, you know, and it can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't have to miss,
definitely.
which was great.
And I'm glad you brought that up because obviously coaching clients are not going to count towards licensure hours because it's not therapy. So making that distinction too. But yeah, even bringing up at my best friend from grad school at Columbia, her husband was a doctor, became a doctor throughout these past like 5 years. It takes so long. And so, she was moving for residency, moving for fellowship, moving for all of this stuff. And I think they moved like 3 or 4 times.
It was brutal.
In like 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, for my husband, it was 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, I think. And I will tell you, we've been together since we were sophomores in college, and we did 5 years of long distance.
Yeah.
Because I just we were 22. I wasn't willing to like move. That was then that phone call happened. And I think about it now and I'm like, that was so dumb. But at the same time, like, you know, it was either that or move and sacrifice parts of my career. And I was young and was definitely not in a place where I was ready to do that for a guy. Don't tell him. But it's hard, you know? It was a brutal decision and it had ramifications for our relationship and it wasn't easy. So those licensing, whether it's somebody who's medicine or active military or whatever, I mean, it's like that can be a really big stressful challenge for a lot of early career therapists, especially, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so maybe a third course?
Yeah, just do it.
We'll see.
Put on. Yeah. Okay, Meredith.
Yes.
What would you say? Let's leave people with, what do you think is a piece of advice you wish you had known before you started your private practice?
I would absolutely lean into like the education around the entrepreneurship piece, honestly. Like the resources that you give, the resources that I provide to a certain capacity are huge. And it's such a huge disservice that our programs aren't providing us with that.
We didn't have anything. I didn't.
No, me neither. In fact, it was discouraged. And so to gain the freedom and flexibility and also like in order to have like a reliable, consistent and influx of income in this profession. Yeah. Like this is stuff that you need to learn and everybody has to learn it. Really? So just really leaning into that and that potential and possibility, finding a coach or a mentor or another therapist who's done it themselves. It's like invaluable.
Yeah, I love that. And okay, so tell everyone, where can they find your info?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram at Your Journey Through, and then my website is yourjourneythrough.com. I'm also dabbling with TikTok. We'll see how it goes. And that's at Your Journey Through as well.
Perfect. And we'll put it all in the show notes so people will have it. Thank you so much for coming on today. I could talk to you for 3 more hours. So I always love talking.
I know. Thanks so much for having me.
This podcast is sponsored by Simple Practice. I've been using Simple Practice since 2016, which has helped me run a smooth and profitable private practice over the years. It has simplified everything from scheduling to billing, giving me a better balance between the work I'm so passionate about and the family time I'm not willing to miss out on. Check out the episode notes to get a free 2-month trial of Simple Practice, my preferred all-in-one HIPAA-compliant solution. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ask Kelley Anything. Today, I want to answer a question I got via email, and it's one that's close to my heart, so I'm going to read it to you, just kind of the main question here. Here it is. Hi, Kelley. Would you be able to do a post or talk somehow on your podcast about being a therapist and how sometimes it feels great and other weeks you just feel like crying? I need inspiration. I love your page. Thank you for your help. All right. I wanted to talk about this one because this is something maybe we don't often cover on the podcast, but I think it's really important, and it's something that's not always fun to talk about. But I just want to, first of all, send some love out there. You know, all of us as therapists have highs and lows in our career, and we work with clients during some of the most challenging times of their lives, right? And we hold space for clients, and that really requires us to find that space within ourselves. And sometimes that means that we do that really well, and it feels really easy and like something we could do. And other weeks on top of our own lives, that can feel really, really heavy. So first of all, I just want to normalize that, because I think sometimes as therapists, we expect ourselves to never face any of these big issues, or to never have moments where we feel like just crying, or where we feel like life is too much, right? No matter what job you're in, you're going to feel that, right? And especially based on the fact that we work in these heavy, serious jobs. So first and foremost, this is really normal. Second of all, how can this get better? So I do think often as we go through our careers, it becomes easier and easier to hold the amount of suffering that a lot of our clients face. But I think that gets easier as we learn to reach out for support. You know, I think it can be really wonderful to join a case consultation group, or to have a few therapist friends who you just call and say, you know what, I've had a really tough day as a therapist. Can I talk to you about it? Because sometimes other therapists can understand that in a way that maybe our friends or our spouses can't understand. Or, you know, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll open up and I'll talk about trauma, or I'll talk about something that's going on with my clients, and it's too much for my family to hold. They don't have the tools that I've had throughout grad school or the training to be able to hold that information. So then I can feel really lonely, because I can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not able to even tell my closest people about this. So the biggest piece of advice I have for you is to make some therapist friends who you can talk about all of this with, or to hire a supervisor if you feel like, you know what, this is happening more often than I'm wanting it to, and I need a place just to kind of dump the feelings of what it feels like to be a therapist and hold all of this. So this is really normal. I want you to know that. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say as a therapist, I have good days and I have bad days, and tell your therapist friends about it, because I think that really helps. Anyway, I hope this helps, and I'll see you next time. If you would like to be featured on Ask Kelley Anything, I love getting listener questions from you guys. Anything about private practice goes. And the best way to do that is actually just to give me a call and leave me a question on my voicemail. So I'm going to tell you the phone number right now and make sure to write it down. Here it is. 805-243-8241. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.